And we'll do a roll call vote. Elaine Lee, present.
Fran Collins, present.
Present.
Lee,
Lee Jenkins, present.
Fran,
Fran Collins, still present.
Meg,
Meg Wheeler, present.
and Rob.
Rob Hillman, present.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 6 of us. We're great. And
Just
John
so you
will be
know,
joining us, and Tom later.
John just circulated about 30 seconds ago the draft budget message. So if you look in your email, it'll be there.
Oh, cool. That's good. And so the first order of business is the budget message. So let's look at our emails. Chris, can you pop it up?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Hold on.
Okay.
That's really helpful. Pinch. That's great.
Is that big enough?
Yeah, that looks good.
Oh, wait a second.
And he send the attachments. Attached for review tomorrow night is a draft. I don't see the attachment, but let me look.
I think that's the old email, Helene.
Yeah, the one that
from
just came. This
yesterday.
this would have just come.
Oh, I see it. I got it. It's Word. Yeah, September 24th. It's right here. So I got it. We could discuss it. Do you want me to read it out loud, or is everyone reading it?
Helene, does it make sense for Rob to walk us through it since he and John
Yes,
put it together?
That sounds good. Okay, Rob can walk us through it.
Whoops.
And mine on the document.
Could we now shrink it because it's taking up all my screen here?
The only way you can either see it or not see it. I can't make it half seen. I don't think.
They could put it on their phone? Okay, yeah.
Does everyone have it now? Does everyone have it up on their screens at home? If you have it, then I don't have to show it then. So.
Yeah, because then I can't call people because it takes up all of it on the iPad.
Okay,
Yeah, but people can talk. So.
it's not clear to me why, and when John gets here, maybe he can address it, but the 7th paragraph that says Rob TBD, I forwarded to him a document to be incorporated. And
Okay.
there seems to have been, well, it doesn't seem to be there yet. But so while what we're looking at is entirely John's work, I'm perfectly happy to walk through it. Just bear with me for a second.
Chris, can you put it back up on the screen, please? There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. We had gone over our message to the selectmen from last year and the selectmen's budget message to the town, and tried to keep what was still relevant and trim out some things that were kind of one-offs or relate to matters that have been resolved. So number 1 is like a pinned Twitter message. You know, we're all in favor of fiscal management policies and practices that are useful and lead to accuracy in books. I think that's pretty uncontroversial. I think we should continue to be a fan of that going forward. Number two, this is basically, again, something that was contained in last year's message. It has to do with the reserve fund policy. There is a reserve fund policy target for 1% of the prior year's levy. The selectmen doubled down on that particular goal, and yet we were a little under. So John's, and we agreed. Perspective was that the maintaining that comment was probably a good idea. It might make sense, rather than reading through all 6 of these, to maybe have any discussion on given points and make any edits as we go. So does that work for everybody? Yes, no, thumbs?
Yep.
Yep,
Fine.
that sounds
Mary,
good.
Mary said yes, so QED. All right, so as to the first paragraph, does anybody have any comment, discussion, amendments, improvements? Fine. As to the second numbered paragraph, comments, questions?
I wonder why we came out 35% low than what we had anticipated to put aside. I mean, if we're going to put away 1%, we can put away 1%, not 2/3 of that.
That was all the result of the pandemic budget, Fran.
Okay.
We had to squeeze. So the goal that we were given was to keep programs and services operating. And this is a wonderfully nice, awesome best practice, but it wasn't something that we could fund and then still fund everything else. So,
Okay.
Yeah. John is here, by the way.
Oh, welcome, John.
I apologize for that. I thought I had sent it last night, and then I rushed and sent it out early, and I sent the wrong one. So I've just sent the corrected one that has Rob's extra material.
Okay. And you sent it through Outlook?
I sent it by email on the same thread as before.
Okay.
I hear John. There he is. Hey, John.
Yeah, I had the same problem I did last week as I was sitting in the waiting room for a while.
Well, I went away for a moment there, but now I'm back. John, we were just,
Yep. I caught everything you said. I just wasn't able to participate.
oh, why don't I hand it off to you for paragraphs 3 through 6, but can I ask, where did paragraph 7 end up?
It in the version I sent after you started, because when I rushed, I picked the first one that it suggested, and it was not the most recent one I'd worked with.
There it is. Okay. All right.
It's here.
Well, we had just, I think we had finished one and we're talking about paragraph 2. There it is.
Yes.
So John, do you want to pick up with any questions or comments on 2? I think I may have missed Chris's response to Fran's question.
what I was saying, Rob, was that because of the tightened budget, we had to squeeze. The goal, the primary goal we were given was to maintain, services and support. And while this is an awesome goal, it wasn't necessary to maintain services at this point. So this became one of those things that would be left on the side, kind of like the extra money for cap we had originally put in, we couldn't do. So. That
makes perfect sense. I think that, just to finish on paragraph 2, then I suspect since Chris endorses this as an awesome goal, we probably ought to maintain it as our recommendation for the same reasons we had before, and the usefulness of that addition to the reserve fund. And if the budget can't support it, it can't support it. But does anybody have any emendations to paragraph 2? Hearing none. John, you want to pick it up with paragraph 3?
Okay. Yeah, paragraph 3 is essentially related. It was making the point, and this is also a sort of repeat from last year, but related to reserve fund, because it makes the point that fully funding the reserve fund at that target supports the broader goal of the 3 to 4% free cash at the end of the year. because any reserve funds that aren't spent do flow into that. So it's not as if you're quote unquote wasting the money, which is somehow how that sometimes perceived.
No, this is exactly, John, what was said last year.
I don't
Yeah.
think that one changed at all.
No, not at all.
The next two are really the same issues as last year as well. They're just basically carrying forward and updating. The number 4 is on the sort of the inventory of needs side of capital planning. And note that the plan is more fleshed out than it was a year ago, but it's not yet complete. So as we say, more work remains to be done in terms of completing that and knowing what all the needs and wishes are so they can be planned for and or thoughtfully prioritized. And then 5 reiterates the need for having a financing plan and noting that the 10-year projection as it develops and expands has average capital requests that are substantially more than what we currently put in, which, and the good news is that it's revealing the need for and value of doing the capital planning. Bad news is we don't yet have it as a plan. We have to work through, identify what things can be funded by grants, identify what things would be planned to be done if the voters approve as override, and or deprioritized and or funded with increased contributions to capital out of the operating budget. That planning remains to be done, and we're recommending that that effort continue. We not lose sight of it. We recognize, I chose not to try to say this in here. We can sort of put something in if you want, recognizing that pandemic and the resulting fiscal pressures will, I shouldn't say resulting fiscal pressures, the resulting draw on the limited available time and energy to do this kind of work. You know, there is a tension there. But because of the fiscal pressures in some ways make the need to do this even greater, not less.
How does the, on these large capital requests, how does bonding fall into that scheme?
Bonding is how you manage the flow of cash. Ultimately, you pay it cash or you pay for the bonds. The financing needs are the same. In fact, if you bond it, the financing needs are arguably a little more because you're paying interest.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I mean,
Any other questions?
one of the wild cards on some of this when you talk about a financing plan is availability of grants. And some of the items, some of the infrastructure, sort of the inventory, especially in infrastructure items, notes where things might be able to be funded with grants. But that needs to be fleshed out and sort of confirmed before you say we're planning to pay for, say, the boat ramp with a grant. You need to make sure you can get the grant. You make sure that any strings that come with the grant are acceptable to the town, et cetera. And number 6 is basically just reiterating what we've said before, continuing to shine a bit of a light on the need to continue the work of planning for and executing the maintenance of existing capital assets, minimize the need for future assets, and to recognize the good work that's been done in that area. But to recognize that it also is not complete. And then number 7 is, turn it back to Rob. He drafted this one. This is the new material on the future pressures on revenue and the operating budget.
You're still muted, Rob. And he just disconnected.
Yes.
In the meantime, is there any question or discussion on those items?
They're pretty straightforward and they're well written. So I think it seemed like you did a very good job.
Helene, I have just a
Sure.
not a question so much as a comment. Since the majority of these, well, at least half of these points really have to do with the 10-year capital plan and or financing that plan. Do in the past, and forgive me because I don't remember, is this something that we have done in coordination or shared with capital budget? In some ways, I almost, because the predominance is about that, maintaining our capital assets, logging them efficiently, knowing what we have, knowing how we're going to finance them and everything.
Well,
is it something that that you work on in concert at all, or?
We have not, since this has been sort of budget message. I think one element of the thinking is that the inventory and the really estimation of that is as much a function of the town manager and the whole budget planning process from the staff
Sure.
and the departments as sort of the constraining factor. And because it's leading into the financing plan, and it's not been clear, I don't think that that's really in the purview, shouldn't say in the purview. It hasn't been something capital budget has historically undertaken.
Okay.
And I think something where the selectmen initiate that, either formally request capital budget to do it or put together some other committee or other structure to sort of be responsible for that process and do the work necessary to produce a plan. I think that has to come from the selectmen.
Okay.
Capital budget would certainly be a contributor to it. I guess the selectmen could ask capital budget to take that on top of the other things that they do. But it hasn't been something that they've done historically.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Am I back? I'm back.
You're back.
You're back.
Yes, hi.
Good luck for me.
Can we go back to 7 on the screen? Point 7, the message on the budget message. Yes.
Yeah, this is, John and I talked about this, and last year we warned that the town ought to be prepared in terms of budget and long-range commitments for a potential recession. We all should have gone out and shorted the market because we're obviously prescient. Obviously, we weren't predicting what's going on now, but and I think without being an economist, I think any reasonable group of people would predict, given the just astonishing numbers in terms of unemployment and economic slowdown, that this is going to echo through state revenue forecasts and actual collections for years, perhaps not starting in this fiscal year, perhaps in quarter 3, quarter 4, it'll manifest itself. But looking at some things from there's an outfit called Mass Budget something my office has a business relationship with, who do historical statistics for these sorts of things. You could look back at the 2001 and 2007 and 9 and see overall dips in revenue collection and aid of, in certain cases, more than 10%. So I would rely on, on Don to sort of, kind of map how those kinds of cuts might impact the town, but, and impact the budget specific ways and what kind of ugly choices it might require. But I think, making it clear that, the most conservative or a very conservative approach, to the greatest extent feasible, is just the way to go. And if this does not turn out to be as ghastly as it probably will, then great. But in terms particularly of long-term commitments, and that would include capital projects, and collective bargaining agreements are typically 3 years. And, they drive a lot of the town spending. So, I think it's appropriate to sound a warning and see if the people who actually get to execute it pay any attention. That said, this was my draft with possibly some of John's edits. If anybody has comments, questions, alternative views, better insights, I'm all ears.
I do have one quick question. That's okay.
Well,
Sure.
You're the expert. That's not fair. But please go ahead.
So we're looking at this as recommendations for the FY22 budget message to the select board, correct?
Yes.
I guess when I look at number 2, the reserve fund, I understand the policy and we had a number of years that we want to get to 1%. To me, that seems more of a longer term goal, especially when you look at what we were able to budget in the last few years. If we were to try to even get to that number, that's $160,000 just there. And then we talk about being ultra conservative on the revenue side. I mean, I'm just trying to understand if number 2, is that a goal to get to 402, which would be the 1% in fiscal 22? Or is that more of a longer term phased in goal at this point?
John? Go ahead.
I think I guess one way to think about it is it interacts with how seriously and literally you take on the revenue projections. I mean, one way to do it would be to allow for some revenue increases, but actually it wouldn't. You put it in the reserve fund, and then if the funds aren't available, it sort of becomes part of your cushion there. It could be viewed as long-term. I think you've got to look at it in the context of all the trade-offs you're making in the budget. And I don't think we have enough of the numbers in front of us at this point that you can actually fully make that trade-off. It needs to be there as a goal, because it is our financial policy, and given priority. I guess without a further, more precise look at the revenue numbers, I don't have anything more to say than that.
All right. Like I said, I was just curious. I want to just try to understand. I know this within our policy. I think at one point we were considering trying to just look at that policy and see if it should need revision based on the amount we're already putting in versus what we've been able to budget in there. So, but I get it, as part of our policy and based on our current policy, 1% is a goal. So I was just trying to understand where we're coming at with that. Is that if that's a 22 budget message recommendation, to me, that means that we need to be trying to get to that 402. But knowing how hard it's been to even get to the percentages that we are in, and then the potential economic issues that you note in number 7, in my opinion, it just seems more of a multi-year phase-in at this point, if that's a real priority goal of the advisory committee.
Yeah, and that's what it was originally. And I mean, look to our side, we all missed that. It was sitting there in the policy and it wasn't done for several years running. This wasn't something that happened all in 1 year. It was gradually increasing and sort of stalled out at around 0.6% when it was scheduled to go up 0.1% every year, and it didn't.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to look at the prior forecast to see what happened. But we've been.
I don't know when it happened. I didn't go back into that, but it.
Right, because I know based on the forecast that I've been using since I started, it's had a consistent growth factor in there. And I know it was part of the policy, but honestly, going through the budget cycle, and you kind of have to have the trade-offs at the same time of making sure that your budget is whole for the departmental level, building in the conservative budget. So I understand we didn't reach that goal when we needed to, but it's definitely something that's been on the radar. And now that, again, like I'm just bringing it up because I know how far behind we are. It's at 0.63%, and to get to the full 1% would be a really big lift in this next budget cycle.
Especially if, as paragraph 7 suggests, you level set revenue entirely.
Right. I mean, for the one thing noting in number 7, we won't know really what happens until the next few months, but the state has committed to level funding our state aid for fiscal 21. I mean, that doesn't mean that if serious issues come up that they can't do 9C cuts or things like that later. But for now, the state level has committed to level funding what we had from FY20. So we decreased our state aid for FY21. So we're already kind of not a big net positive, but we're already at a net positive based on that state aid as we sit right now.
That's good. Any other comments?
The only thing I would with Don is and by the way, I understand where this is coming from, and you heard me say, I think it's a good long-term goal. I think 0.7 and all the things you mentioned are really important. I mean, they're things we've been talking about. 0.7 really becomes a lead in some ways, right? It's almost 0.1 because we're in the COVID world now, right? We're in the COVID, and we really don't know. I mean, okay, knock on wood, so far. That said, the state hasn't adopted a budget yet. And as Don said, we don't know, even though they've committed to hold us harmless, doesn't mean they're going to. And even if they do, it doesn't mean in FY22 they don't take an axe to these things and start trimming away. It really depends on what happens. And, I haven't seen the most recent state revenue numbers. I know they recovered somewhat over the summer, but I don't think they're anywhere near where they were. So, if number 7 is really your lead, which in some ways it is, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, that's going to change all the other things. All right. I mean, if we're going to level, and again, I get where this is coming from because we've been talking about it internally. If we're going to level revenue or level fund, the other things just kind of fall down, unless you're encouraging us to make a trade-off between services and some of these other things. So, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that's a real good point, Chris. In terms of the sequencing, your committee basically divided the labor and then stuck them together at the last minute without, I think, giving adequate thought to that.
I'll cop to that.
So I would suggest to the committee that we do move number 7 up to probably number 2. I think number 1 still serves as a good sort of reference thing to remind ourselves of at the outset.
I think that's a good idea, John, because it sets the tone for the budget message for this particular, coming year.
I would agree too. I think it, as Chris said, the items contained in number 7 are going to shape everything that follows after that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Although
I agree.
I think that certainly, to Don's point, it sets context for the reserve fund. With regards to the capital planning, that's a bit of a different beast because it really is long-term budget work. It's not the FY22 per se, and it contends for the sort of time and energy to do the work, but it isn't in direct conflict with with number 7, I don't think. The funding level for capital, which note I took out somewhat for that reason, in terms of any immediate sort of additional increments to capital prior to having finished that financing plan, that certainly would be in tension with what's now number 2. I wouldn't see the capital planning as in tension in terms of budgeting per se.
I see the financing piece. We could probably really start adding that in this cycle. I mean, we understand what we have coming in and available each year currently to the capital stabilization. I mean, we have a forecast of what we are annually level of committing.
Right.
Now, like Chris said, I did the best effort to come up with a 2% increase year over year little schedule, and that we were going to try to do that 2%, which was about $50,000 in 21. But once COVID hit and we reduced some of our revenues, we brought it back down to the level commitment of about 1.9 this year. So we are taking a look at that, but we know it's about 1.9 a year, offset by any debt service that is issued. So we can layer that in once we once we update our 10-year plan. We can share that, and then that's cash available. And like you said, John, if we're not paying cash, then we're issuing bonds, which we pay over 5, 10, whatever the years are.
And if your budget isn't able to sustain an increase in capital, and the wish list, the projected inventory adds up to more than that, you know that at the point, you know where the different delta is, and you're sort of working that proactively rather than just a sort of a random, I won't say random, but sort of just going through the list each year without reference to what's coming down the pike. You're doing it in a more thoughtful, long-term oriented way, which is how capital ought to be done.
And we've actually had some of those conversations, John, privately. I mean, Don actually has a funding spreadsheet that he shares with capital. And so yeah, and I think you've seen it too, right? So we've looked out over 10 years and seen where we are and what we can fund. And, part of it, and again, as you also point out, some of this is we know that, we can't do all of these capital projects without grant funding or CPC funding, right? Some of these things, like, for example, tennis courts, great project, right? That said, if it's that or police cruisers, probably the police cruisers are going to win, or, improvements to the HVAC at the schools. That said, they're not. There's another funding source for them, and we should identify it and make sure we seek it. With the Seaport stuff, we just won $330,000. They're really planning and engineering grants for the town for the lift system and for the boat ramp. That we actually have a small match in those too. So, if we're going to do those are things that. Again, it's not. We can make a recommendation. It's really up to everyone collectively to make a determination. Those should probably be prioritized again for grant or some other kind of funding. And then for something bigger, we talked about again, I'm just throwing these out there because these are some of the big ones. The school roofs, for example, we talked about consolidating them into a package, and then potentially going out for a debt exclusion vote, or at least packaging them and bonding them over time, because they're big projects and they're like worth $5+ million when you consolidate them, and we can't eat that in a year in cash. It's just not going to happen. So,
right.
So Ben, by the way, if you want to have a meeting where we deep dive into some of this stuff, and that's something I figured we'd talk about a little bit later in the meeting, I think it's great, and we're happy to do that. I mean, we're not heading for a special town meeting. We have a little more time this fall to deep dive into some of these topics.
Right. The other thing,
Chris, what you mentioned about the roof, there's state funding for that, after a certain amount of years.
Right. No, and we know that. And again, that's like the MSBA accelerated repair funding and stuff, right?
Right.
Except so those factored into the broad conversation. That said, if you all want to deep dive into this, that's fine, and we can do that one night.
Any more comments about the budget message? any of the different paragraphs? So, Mary,
I'm a little unclear about where we're landing with the order of this. If we still feel like, because the capital planning process runs a bit independently,
mhm.
should that still stay up in the top?
No,
And
I would suggest
seven-
it's 7 go up and be number 2, and everything else just slots down a level.
Okay,
That's what I'm showing you now. I actually took 7, John. I flipped it to number 2.
Sorry, I was looking at the document, not your screen. Yep.
Yes, sir. You see it? So that's what I just did. I just, by the way, there's a random X at the end of agreements in the last line of 2. I took that.
Yeah, that was a copy. I copy and pasted, and it was missed the period. And when I put the period in, I apparently hit X.
Yeah, so that's the only edit I've made this whole document other than moving 7 to 2. So I haven't changed anything. I can circulate this whole if you
I
want.
guess the only other question I have from the discussion is on the reserve policy number 3. In light of, I mean, I think Don's comments are well taken. Whether we want to put something, revise it to recognize that tension and sort of recommend reaffirming the policy and intent to get there, but not suggesting that we think the only way to do it is to go straight to 1% in FY22.
Yeah, I would add one sentence before the last sentence that would communicate that.
So I'm going to I'll type it if somebody reads it or creates one.
I'm trying to think of the word. I'm thinking in the current next to last sentence where it says we continue to recommend adhering to the approved policy.
You can say efforts to, instead of adhering, why don't you say we continue to recommend moving towards or taking steps to reach, or, you know.
Yeah, I like that. That's better.
Or instead of continue to recommend, we say recommend reaffirming the town's commitment to the existing policy and planning to move toward 1% or something like that.
Yes. Yes.
What'd you say? Moves, John? Continued moves?
Reaffirm the existing plan, and I don't want to, in current circumstances, say establish a plan is almost setting up.
How about continuing strive to reach? I mean, I'm just throwing that out there for your conversation. You can do whatever you want.
And reaffirm the existing policy and continue to strive to reach 1% to assure us. Yeah, how about that? That's getting to the gist of it. I think the existing policy is a good one, but we need to continue to strive for it. We tried to do that with OPEB, with, post-employment benefits.
You're the wordsmith, John. Do you have
I'm okay with that.
Okay, if this is good, then all right.
And number 4, now, when we talk about the undesignated or free cash policy, that comes right out of our actual policy, right?
The numbers do.
Okay.
I don't think. Oh,
Was
I have.
this-
Yeah. The quotation is the act. Yeah, I've got quotes around it. That's the actual
Achieve and
policy.
maintain undesignated.
Okay. That's something that I've been, this year, we're gonna change that up a bit, because undesignated undesignated fund balance and free cash are not the same. Free cash is calculated based off undesignated fund balance, but they're not the same thing. So I don't know the best way to, I think for now in the recommendation, it's fine, but going forward, when we review the policies again, we might just tweak that wording a bit.
Yeah, it doesn't change the gist, the purpose, the substance of that paragraph.
Exactly. I could have sworn that was the exact quote, from that policy.
Yeah,
I just
that's
wanted to
why
make
they're
sure
quote-
that was.
I hope it is, since there are quotes around it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, John.
Any more comments about the budget measures? So do we need to take a vote to support it?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So is there a motion on the floor to support the budget policy? The budget message that we're going to send to the select board.
I just gave all of you a copy of the amended version, so you have it, so.
Okay. Mary, are you making the motion? I can't hear you.
Muted.
You're muted, dear.
I'll make the motion, but I think the wording should be as amended. I mean, I don't know how you do that since we did this in real time during the meeting, but
Well, how about in the form that Chris just circulated?
Right.
And then that budget message should be attached to the minutes.
okay.
Does
So
that
yes, I
work for
will
you?
make a motion.
Okay, she makes the motion. In the form that was just agreed and we
Yep.
just read. And is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Meg seconds the motion. And so we were going to take a vote in terms of aye, if you're in favor of it. Helene Lee, aye.
Mary McGoldrick, aye.
Lee,
Lee Jenkins, aye.
Fran,
Fran Collins, aye.
Rob,
Bob Hillman, aye.
John,
John Chapman, aye.
Meg.
Meg Wheeler, aye.
Okay, so it passes.
So do you want to then, I gave you the version, do you want to take away, are you the secretary tonight, Mary? If you
Yeah.
want just take a check at it, make sure you take the word draft off it, put the vote on or whatever, and send it back to Tracy and she'll send it to the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Who seconded the motion? Sorry.
Meg.
Okay.
The next thing that we're going to do is FY21 fiscal update by Don. Take it away.
Sorry, just give me 1 second. Chris, do you want to pull up the local receipts report first?
I like Vanna White here, I'm like moving the boards, so.
Oh, that's all right. Everybody should have the report package that was sent out.
Right.
Overall, I mean, we're looking at just the first 2 months of fiscal 21.
Mm-hmm.
So far, we're in great shape between all 3 appropriated funds, general fund, water, and sewer. Looking at general fund first, through the first 2 months, we're at 25.7% of the budget collected. I mean, 25% within the first 2 months is great. I mean, if you look at month over month, 2 out of 12 months is 16.7%. We're well ahead. And really that's factoring in, there's a lot of revenue that's budgeted in here that doesn't really hit the books. We really don't start seeing it after the first of the year. So we're already ahead for revenue collection. You'll see a big portion of that is property tax, which based on this report includes real estate, personal property, and also any tax liens or deferred taxes collected. I did note that looking at local receipts year over year, we are down a bit from the compared to last year through the first two months. We're down about 22%, or 104,000. And really, the big changes or decreases are motor vehicle excise, which this is really the revenue collected in the first half of the year really relates to prior year stuff. Additional small commitments from the prior year. The actual large $1.5 million, $1.7 million commitment that we normally post and start collecting does not occur till January or February. So I'm not really worried that we're down a little bit. I did look at what we committed in the first couple of months over the last 3 years, and it's been consistent from 18 through 20, anywhere from like 83 to 75,000. I think just last year it appeared to be a bit of an anomaly to actually collect more than we billed in that first quarter. And it could have been just a a quicker collection of what was outstanding as of June 30th before that. So really, I think it's just timing of collections, and to me, that's not really anything to worry about 2 months into the fiscal year. And you'll notice the other larger item that's down is investment earnings. It's down 70%, but it is still at 39% of the budget. So we're well ahead of what we budgeted for investment or interest earnings for the year. But again, we were down 22% in local receipts. I want to make that note to you folks and just highlight those two items. You will see other small decreases, but those were really the two to note, in my opinion. Moving on to the expenditure side. Through August 31st, we're at about 19.2% of the budget overall. And again, departmentally, we're well below that. It's 19.2% because of timing. You'll see in employee benefits, for instance, we're at, sorry, I see some of your faces on the side of my percentages. So we're at 38%. That's because July 1st, or in that first month, we spend about $2.5 million, if not a little bit more. I think it was 2.7 almost this year for the pension appropriation that we pay out in July. Now we do that to take advantage of, I believe it's a 3% discount. So there's a discount that saves us about $50,000 or $60,000, paying it in one lump sum at the beginning of the year instead of paying it over. The other option is paying it over 2 installments. But we have the cash. We've had positive cash flow for really years, even before I got here, and we've been consistently doing that. So that is something that's paid up front. Again, transfers to other funds, which are all our transfers to capital stabilization, free cash, but to OPEB, the stabilization, and those are posted as of July 1. So that comes into effect. And then also debt service is based on predetermined debt schedules. A bulk of our debt is paid July and August, and then subsequent payments are 6 months later. So we'll see again in February, March, more payments in. And there's others sprinkled throughout the year, but a lot of our debt is paid between July, August, and January, February timeframe. So overall, 19.2%, I think we're doing great. And
the lesson to me, Donna, this one is that you got to look at the individual departments. The 19.2 average, just a stroke of luck that it comes even close to 1/6.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
These lines are so dependent on specific factors, including schools, which is the other one on the other direction, the big one. The fact that it comes close to 2/12 is sort of coincidence and meaningless.
Of course.
You really have to do exactly what you're doing here, which is look at each line, see why it is the way it is, and whether that's cause for concern.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I guess I could have done a shorter story, but 19.2% overall, and then highlighting those big areas.
I thought you were going to tell us that schools were doing gung ho and we're going to turn back a few million. They're so low.
I would love that, but I don't think that will ever happen. But
No.
The other thing to note, 19.3%, as you mentioned, if we want to look at the line items, public safety. On 1.1 million already spent, there's about $80,000 right now through August that we've spent out of a line item in emergency management related to COVID expenses. And now that's just in there because that's the way I've been accounting for it before I move any money to the grants.
Right.
So there's 80 grand in there that we will reclass to either the CARES grant or FEMA, depending on what those expenses were for. So slightly overstated by 80,000, but since they're in there now, that's where they're being reported as of 8/31. Mary?
Yeah, I have a question about the overtime for the police. Is that what you're referring to there, or is that something different?
Something different altogether.
Okay.
I mean, overtime for the police.
Because that seems to be trending a little high.
We've high compared to budget or year over year?
High compared to budget. So
unfortunately, historically, we've always we have not been able to get a good budget number into police. It's one of those things where we try to increase the police overtime year over year. They have a structural deficit based on how they operate, and so they're consistently over the budget for overtime. And again, kind of the financial constraints, trying to get the 1% for the reserve fund, trying to increase police overtime to a level that, will not put them over budget, or to be on target. We just haven't been able to get there yet. We do work year over year trying to increase that number, but so that, to me, that makes sense. I guess I should have pointed that out in my little narrative.
Okay, so I wanted to double check that those weren't any costs that could then be rolled back into CARES grant or something else like that.
There are some during the height of the pandemic that Glenn Pratt is going to submit to FEMA to try to get reimbursed for. We had a few folks be moved up to acting lieutenant and a few other positions so that there were more people in command during the pandemic. And so some of those added costs, so remember, anything for CARES or FEMA needs to really be above what you budgeted. So if they were getting $50 an hour and then they got 55, again, I don't know what their hourly rate is. I'm just throwing numbers off the top. Sure. That $5 increment is what we can really submit for reimbursement. So there are some costs
anything
from last
over
year.
and above.
What was that?
So anything over and above what we planned for, essentially.
Exactly.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we can move on.
All right, Chris, if you could just move on to water for me. So water, through August, we're at 18%. Year over year, we're actually 32% higher than last year. Our first quarter water billing was up a couple $100,000, about 200 plus or minus. And you can see our user charge collections are up 175,000 or 59% year over year. Again, that's attributed to a higher commitment amount in August and collections through August 31st. Another increase that was pretty significant year over year was the sale of water to Linden Ponds, which I'm assuming same type of thing. Is just more water use and they're billed monthly as well. So that is just based on more usage. Those would be the two larger items to note. And then on the expenditure side, we're fine. Operational expense, 11.5% through August. Everything else is debt service or transfers that are posted July 1 or debt service that has been paid July or August.
Fran?
This may not be relevant to the immediate discussion, but the water that we send to Linden Ponds, are they limited to how much water we can send them or how much water they can take? And are we providing for hydrant services in that area as well? I just wonder, particularly in this times of drought and high water demand, do they have free rein of how much water they use? You may not have the answer, but I'm curious.
Yeah, Fran, they are in contract, and I believe so. They're operating within that contract, and they're under water restrictions too. They're not supposed to be using this, for irrigating the lawns and stuff. At least I hope that's not what they're doing. But the project has grown. I mean, they finally built phase 2, I think, or whatever it's called. So, it's not unexpected that the water use has been going up, but as far as I understand, it's within the contract limits. So.
Maybe you could double check that for us, because it's a good point.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. And get back to us. Thanks. Thanks, Fran. Any other questions? You want to continue, Don?
Yeah, moving on to sewer. Quick update here, 21.5% of revenue collected based on the budget. Sewer is based on water usage. So again, their commitment was up quite a bit. Not as significant as water, but about a $39,000, 16% increase from last year. At the same time, the other large increase in revenue to date has been their connection fees. So they're at about 200% of where we were last year, about $47,000 increase over last year. And then the expenditure side, they are also in great shape. They're at 12.3% of their budget, operational. Everything else, debt service, again, based on timing, that's at 75%. And we have the indirect costs and other transfers that have already been posted as of July 1.
Questions about sewer? Okay, continue.
And that's where we are. Those are the three appropriated funds.
Yep.
That's where we stand through August 31st. I don't know if there's anything else Chris would like to add at this point.
No, we're just, we're normally we wouldn't do a lot of meetings. I think we're doing these regular updates with the board of the select board very specifically every month. And if you folks would like us to do that with all of you, that's fine too. I think it's probably a good idea if you're able. So we can stay on top of this. One of the things that Don will also be doing is doing a COVID update, our COVID cares and some of the other grants. He's going to do, I think sometime next week, Don, we're talking about a first cut of through June 30th.
Yep.
And then we'll do another update on a quarterly basis for the first quarter in October. And we'll be briefing, we'll typically, like we just briefed the board on August 31st now, we'll do the end of September at the end of October. That's the plan. So, based on when the meetings fall. So, and if there's anything that happens in between, we'll let you know. I mean, if the state has a budget, the state at this point is probably signaled they're not going to adopt a budget until after November. They want to know what's going to happen in Washington. They want to see how things are going to sort out. So they're really, I think, just month to month at this point, which is super unusual, but it is what it is. If there's any big changes there, then we'll adapt. But I think as Rob put into the budget message for all of you, it's really not 21 that we're as concerned about. It's 22, because we're a trailing indicator. People are not going to not have cars, but maybe they won't buy the new car this year, and it'll slow down the excise tax. And meals, we're actually very curious about meals. That's one thing that, because the state deferred it, we haven't collected $1 yet this fiscal year. It'll be very interesting to see what happened. Now, Cohasset's really stepped up and supported a lot of local restaurants. That said, they're all not operating at full capacity. They're just not. So we'll have to see what happens when those numbers come finally in. So that said, we did budget decreases on all of those specialty funds, those kinds of revenues anyway. So I think we'll be okay. It's really, we got through this. So if those kind of decreases happen again, as Rob also pointed out, we're going into contract years. It's going to have an impact on what we can do. So, but those are for future conversations.
Thank you. The next agenda item is the minutes. Do we have the minutes? Did people send in the minutes from July 14th?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Were they posted? At least I saw them.
Both of those were sent out around
Yes.
1 o'clock today. So
Yes, I read both of them. Can we just post it for everyone to see? I read the July 14th and the September 10th ones.
I did not send them to Chris. So
Okay.
I don't.
But you posted it on Outlook, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Chris can get it and post it for us.
I don't have them. Mary didn't send them to me.
I'll send it to you right now.
Thank you. Because we could just read it, especially July 14th, if we can get that one out of the way.
Okay, I just sent it to you.
See how long our screening system works here.
Okay. So this is July 14th.
All right, here we go.
And that was a pretty brief meeting, as I recall. So this was our meeting embedded in the joint meeting. Correct, Mary?
Yes. So these notes are from Tracy. This is our portion of the meeting from Tracy.
Right. Mm-hmm. So was basically for the transfer $479,000 and 58 $479,584. Did everyone get to read that? Could we make a motion to approve the meeting, the minutes from July 14th, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there a second on the floor? John? Okay. And let's have a vote in favor of accepting the minutes of July 14th, 2020. Helene Lieb, aye.
Mary McGoldrick, aye.
Lee?
I abstain.
Oh, I actually did not vote. I was not there. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. So that's abstain.
I don't believe that.
Fran?
I abstain. I wasn't there either.
So we may not have quorum. Oh, no, we
Well,
won't.
you know, some of the members are just not there, are not here anymore. So you're gonna have to be able to adopt the minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
Rob,
I don't think people I don't think you necessarily have to abstain just because you weren't there. Do you approve these minutes on the say-so of the people who took them? It's
Well,
a
if that's the
matter of
case,
trust, guys.
Rand Collins, aye. If that's the case.
Okay. Lee?
I approve.
Rob?
Aye.
John? John? I can't hear you.
You're muted. You're
That's
muted.
because I was,
Okay.
John Chapman, aye.
Meg?
Meg Wheeler, aye.
Okay, thanks. That's approved. And do we also have the other ones? The ones from September? September 10th?
That was in the same email.
Okay, thanks. So we can look at that. Budget updates, yep. Yep. Okay. Okay.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? Because I wasn't at this meeting.
Yes, sure.
Sorry, if you scroll back up. Oh, no, hold on. Can I have that back? I just had one question when I was looking. Again, I wasn't at the meeting, so I apologize.
Sure.
Everyone else probably
That's
understands
okay.
this. But I noticed it said the town spent 280 grand and then approximately 425 grand. And the numbers listed there, no, you were on the right spot. The numbers listed there for each of the items didn't add up. And so I was just curious if that was just meant to be the amount.
Yeah, it says the majority of the expenses have been for.
Okay. It just feels like that's like 300 grand out of 753. I was just curious.
Right. It was just.
Meg, if I could clarify, and
Yeah.
I should reword this because it is misleading. The listed items primarily take us through June 30th.
Okay. That's what I was
Okay.
thinking. I just,
So I will wordsmith that,
Okay.
because otherwise it's misleading if you're going to list the numbers.
Okay,
And
so
Thank you.
we're gonna change that.
Yeah, through September 10th, we were at 425, but Don did not list all of that
give
out.
the breakout. That's what I assumed. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
So if you can make that change, that would be
Yep.
great. So we can still vote on it with that change. Keep
Yep.
going. Okay. Yep. Okay, thank you. So we need a motion on the floor to accept the minutes as amended by Mary with Meg's comments, okay? Is there a motion on the floor?
Move to accept the minutes.
Okay, a second?
Mary.
Second was Mary?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye, Helene Lee. Mary?
I'm Mary Goldberg.
Lee?
Lee Jenkins, aye.
Fran?
Fran Collins, aye.
Rob?
Bob Hillman, aye.
John?
John Chapman, aye.
Meg?
Meg Wheeler, aye.
Thanks. And if you could send those approved minute, like what, at this point, they get sent to Tracy, correct?
No, the minutes get sent to Beth.
The town clerk, right.
And just so you know, I did go on the website because we still don't have any minutes posted, even though we've approved all of our minutes. And I spoke to Carol the other day because I'd been sending them to Carol. She doesn't do anything with the minutes. If they don't go to Beth, they don't go up online. So I'm going to call our minutes and do that.
Okay,
Yay.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I thank you very much. Thanks for taking care of that. The other is just to solidify our next meetings. Our next meeting is October 8th, I believe. And that will be also at 7 p.m. And Chris, I was thinking of the future meetings. You know, maybe we could meet on the 22nd of October and also November 5th for the purpose of budget updates and some of the some of the suggestions from the people here tonight of what they wanted to have you look into.
So just a heads up, I don't know if this affects our quorum. I can only meet from 7 to 7:30 on the 8th and the 22nd. I'm fine on the 5th.
Okay.
I was actually going to ask, we had, well, never mind.
Yes, Rob?
I withdraw my question because it was going nowhere.
So
Okay.
I do want to, if you just have a second, talk about topics you want to talk about. So one of the things that you all had talked about was actually mentioned in the last set of minutes was to do a deeper dive into labor contracts. And we do that in executive session. I've already talked to Miriam. I think it would be easier for the meeting of the 22nd if you did it, if that was like a labor night, if that was okay. Although you could do it later. I mean, and you in an executive session, we can supply the contracts and background on the unions, at least on the town side. I don't have anything on the school side I can share with you, but
Okay.
I'd only do a night for the schools.
Yeah, we should have no problem meeting quorum by then. Hopefully the Troca is going to meet shortly and we have 2 people that we're interviewing and hopefully everything works out. We have 2 new members and John can take his long needed rest and Tom hasn't been coming, didn't come tonight. So I think we'll be okay about quorum.
Well, if John wants to not take a rest, I mean, if you're only going to, I think there's still only 2 applicants for the 3 seats. So if John,
that would be really helpful, John.
if John wants to be an ongoing holdover, he's welcome to be. But
that would be really, really helpful, John.
I guess he's going to mute himself now.
As long as you're done by 7:45 on Thursday nights.
I think we'll really try to do that. We'll really try to do that, okay?
So if we're going to make October 22nd Labor Night, I'll call it Labor Night.
Okay.
Contracts and other materials, and that'll be an executive session evening because we'll go into strategies and things, and we would prefer not to have those conversations recorded on.
So that has to be Labor Night and executive session.
Yeah. And if there's anything else you want to do and not an executive session, that's fine. But,
well, we could vote
Chris.
to come out. We have to vote to go in and out of executive session. So the next meeting is the 8th, And then after that, we'll wait to the 22nd. Yes.
Okay.
And then the meeting after that will be November 5th. Okay?
What on the 8th? I mean, are there things that you want us to prepare for the 8th collectively here? Any topics? I mean, we give.
Well, since it's so weird because we're not having a fall meeting, I mean, do we really need to meet on the 8th? Chris?
There's no fast answer to that question. It's answered itself.
Yeah, I'd say at this point, we will have a September update for you on the 22nd, I think, Don. Is that safe? October 22nd. If we do an update that night and the labor stuff, that'll probably take up a decent chunk of night. So if you want, so we just won't do it on the 8th. We'll just, if you want, just do one on the 22nd, that's fine. Okay,
Yeah,
we'll plan for the 22nd.
What?
We'll plan for the 22nd, and then do you want to set the, what is the 2 weeks after that?
Yes.
5th.
Yes.
So if you want to, I mean, at that point,
The 22nd and November 5th.
maybe November 5th could be a continuation of Labor Night, and then maybe
Yes.
schools to participate that night. Maybe we'll do that.
Okay.
Who's
So
gonna-
the next meeting will not be on October 8th. So people who want to take a long Columbus Day weekend, take it. And so we'll have
Oh,
October
Chris.
20th.
I can't do the 22nd.
Okay.
I'm out of state.
Okay, so what we can do, we won't do a fiscal update with, well, I can do it with you. If Don's already done it we're going to plan on doing it for the selectmen on the 20th. So you'd have to live with me.
Okay, that's okay. We'll take.
You're going to be around on the 20th for the selectmen's meeting?
Don,
Yep.
are you okay that the town manager speaks for you?
Sure.
Okay, so October 22nd and November 5th. October 22nd is going to be, the issue is going to be a fiscal update, right?
Right.
And also we're getting into the labor, the union contracts. And that part has to be executive session.
If we're going to get into strategy and stuff, yes.
And November 5th will be a continuation.
And I'll see if, who's your school liaison? Is it still you? Are you and Rob and Mary? Oh, do you want to reach out to your counterparts over there at the, do you want to do that, reach out, or me, or why don't you do it? Yeah.
I was going to reach out to, it's Craig who's the chair now, right?
Right.
And just see, Rob, if you wanted to be included, I can put you on the email.
Put me on. If I'm available, I will.
Okay, because I do feel like we should touch base. They've done a great job with the school communication. And they have a new mask policy and all this great stuff. But I'm mostly really curious to hear what they're thinking of in terms of when they're going to start negotiations and stuff like that.
They're in mediation tomorrow, I was told. Pat Sullivan and I talked today, just to try to settle the current. I mean, everyone's in the classroom right now, but they still have some items to try to hammer out. So hopefully.
Okay, so the purpose of the schools is the update, a lot dealing with COVID. Is that what what we want? What are the purpose of the school update? Mary?
Well, I think we should find out where they are. As I understand it, they have monies. They got a CARES grant, so they have monies that should take them through probably the holiday break.
Okay, so
And-
financial.
So, and then we don't, I mean, Don, do we know where they sit after that?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part, but the CARES grant is just like the CARES grant the town has. So that money currently is only available through December 30th.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we should find out where they are.
And based on conversations that I've had with Susan, I mean, their budget seems to be in decent shape based on the grants they've received to get them through at least December. As Chris mentioned in the last meeting, they have hired some new staff members there that are partly covered with the grant and then partly covered by the budget. I worked with Susan to identify areas for them to be able to fund that. So they should be in good shape, but you know, that's just coming from me and discussion with Susan. I think it'd be good for you guys to definitely have that discussion with the school committee independently as well.
Okay.
And I wasn't able to log into their school committee meeting this last time, but hopefully I'll be able to do that next week.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So we know when we have the two new meetings, and by the meeting of October 22nd, if things go well, Chris, we will then have 2 additional members.
I think you're planning to meet as a troika next week, right? Is that the?
Yes, yes,
Good. Yeah, so you'll have there's two candidates right now, so.
right, exactly. So
They work.
that's
That'd be
what's
great.
going on. So anyway, I think we're pretty much all done. So there's a call for adjournment, unless there's any topic that was not expected, reasonably anticipated. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Lee, second to the motion. John? Okay, all those in favor of adjournment, Lean Lee, aye.
Mary McGoldrick, aye.
Lee Jenkins, aye.
Fran?
Fran Collins, aye.
Rob? Rob?
His lips moved.
Okay, John?
John Chapman, aye.
Meg
And
Wheeler,
Meg?
aye.
Thank you all and stay safe. We'll see you.
Good night, everyone.
Peace out.
Aye.
Chris, can you stay on for a second?